But let's look at data that is far more disturbing than any news poll. The Australian Financial Review reports more than 3/4 of new jobs created in 2024 were in government-funded industries, talking things like education, health. Now, about 1/3 of the 487,000 jobs created last year were in the public sector, but more than 3/4 of all jobs were underwritten essentially by the government. Adam, that's not great news. And not surprisingly, guess what? Productivity has also plummeted.
Yeah, certainly the productivity in these so-called non-market sectors has historically and still is been very low. Basically, the fact that more than 3/4 is in the public sector is very, very concerning for Australia's future prospects, because obviously all these workers are financed from tax revenue. And of course, tax revenue slows economic growth. It's actually worth pointing out that on the IPA's own research, it's actually worse than 3/4. It's more than 82% of jobs since August 2022 have actually come from the public sector.
So it's 2.5 years, so not just the past year. It wasn't.
So the growth's extraordinary, because overall, if you look at all of the jobs in the economy, I think 18% are in the non-market sector, and yet that relatively small sector has accounted for more than 80% of the new jobs. Very worrying.
I wonder what percentage the NDIS and all the related industries are responsible for, because that just seems to be completely unsustainable.
We certainly saw Bill Shorten. I think he said that 500,000 people were employed because of the NDIS. Now, they are probably classified as private sector workers on some measures, right? But of course, in reality, they are really public sector workers, and they are a drain on the productivity of the economy, it must be said.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's like immigration, where you can bring in an influx of people and really game the data and make it look like you've had a big growth in GDP and everything's going well, we're having economic prosperity and growth. But when you look at the per capita data, it doesn't look so flash. And this seems to be a little bit of that. Yeah, the job numbers look great, unemployment is at a low level, but if the taxpayer is underwriting all this...
And look, they certainly are. I mean, we've had over the past 3 or 4 years the biggest increase in income tax in real terms pretty much in 30 or 40 years in Australia, and yet both sides of politics go on about so-called tax cuts, the stage 3 tax cuts. Well, look, inflation was far worse, and so because those brackets aren't indexed, people have actually had a big increase in tax, and all of that extra money has been spent on these sorts of public sector jobs. It's very worrying. Both sides are not really putting forward good solutions for Australia's future.
Now, the WA election was over the weekend. The Liberals performed terribly. The government has been returned, the Labor government, with a massive majority. I'll be talking to Professor Ian Plimer about that a little bit later, but is this good news for Anthony Albanese? Or I've heard some political experts say it's actually bad news, because whatever grievances West Australians have, they'll take it out on him rather than their state government.
Look, it's hard to know. Western Australia is so far away. I'm not an expert. It's almost like a country to itself. But that said, look, I think overall probably bad for the coalition, because they were expected to pick up more than 5 or 6 seats, and I think that's all they're going to end up with in the parliament. So they've done pretty badly.
They've got.
It kind of reflects Victoria's state poll, right? There was a big swing away from Labor, but it didn't really go to the Liberals very much. It kind of went to Teals. In fact, I think the Teals are going to win a seat in the West Australian Parliament for the first time, or at least a Teal-type candidate. Look, I don't think it's great for the coalition, but that said, as you point out, I mean, it can go the other way too. You have to speak to some psephologists on that.
I guess we'll find out in a month or two. It's not too far away. Let's talk about something a little bit different. Veteran comedian David Hughes. He was forced to remove a group of women from his show at the Adelaide Fringe Festival because, well, they kept chattering away. They kept just disrupting the show, annoying people sitting around them. Let's have a look at the footage, and you can see Hughesy gets pretty angry here. He gives them a couple of warnings and then he loses it.
So that's it. No, I'm sorry, it's my show. You talk one more time around. Alright, that's it. Alright, seriously, this is ridiculous.
Adam has since said, I gave the group of women multiple chances. They were infuriating audience members near them and me, and as they were in the second row. So yeah, that was definitely annoying Hughesy. And I would say there's nothing worse than if you're watching a comedy show or any sort of live performance, and you've got people chattering away. It's a distraction. It takes away from the experience. And you might remember, I don't know if this made the news in America, it probably did because it made headlines around the world, but a comic Arch Barker last year booted a breastfeeding mum from his program because the baby was making all sorts of noise. He got absolutely slammed for it, but I've got to say I'm with the comics on this one. That mum and baby went on the project to protest what had happened, and even during a TV interview, the baby's making little noises, as cute as it may be, it's actually very disruptive.
Yeah, look, certainly I'm with both of these comedians on this. I think the bigger threat, though, for comedians generally in Australia is all these impositions on free speech, these new laws that are being passed by state parliaments, especially in Victoria and New South Wales, where it is now illegal, I understand, to severely ridicule a group, quote unquote, severely ridicule. So stand-up's going to get very, very hard. So maybe these women did not find him very funny, but even so, they were being very rude and they should have been asked to leave.
Oh, absolutely. If you're sitting in the second row, or really anywhere where there's people around you, you've just got to shush it, unless there's audience participation called for. Adam Creighton, I thought we were going to fight about that one. I thought you were going to take the ladies' side, but here we are. We're
sorry about that.
Unity ticket behind Husey. Thanks for your time tonight.